Good morning. My name is Paul Weld. I'm the chairman of the Maryland Transportation Authority Board. Today is Thursday, February 27th, 2025, and I hereby call the meeting of the MDTA Board to order at 9 a.m. This morning, we're having our meeting in person at MDTA headquarters, and in accordance with live streaming law, this meeting is being live streamed on the MDTA Board webpage. I would like to say welcome to the members and staff who are with us today. For the record, Member Gaines is unavailable to join us this morning, and members Rosen and Sneed are joining us today via the conference call. As a reminder, I ask that anyone who is in the room with us this morning to refrain from speaking unless you are presenting or answering a question to avoid background noise on the live stream. I would also like to ask members to speak loudly and clearly so those in the back of the room are able to hear you. Also, please say your name when motioning or seconding to help with the meeting minutes. There are no members in the public, no elected officials, and no media who have pre-registered to comment at this morning's meeting. For those who are watching this meeting via the live stream, we have posted materials for today's meeting on the MDTA Board webpage so that you can follow along if you would like. We'll now start with the agenda. Agenda item number 1 is approval of the open session minutes of January 30th.
Chairman, I move for approval. Member Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Cox.
I'll second. Member Ganjin.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. The second agenda item is approval of the closed session meeting minutes of January 30th, 2025. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, so move. Member Ganjin.
Thank you. Second?
Member Artinger, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. The third.
Aye.
Thank you. The third agenda item is contract awards. Mr. Davis? And I'm sorry. Sure. Member Von Paris will recuse himself for the first item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board. For the record, my name is Jeff Davis with the Division of Procurement here at the wonderful MDTA, and I have 3 contracts to present for approval. First contract here is contract number MDTA 2023-02, Comprehensive Project Planning and Miscellaneous Consulting Services for the MDTA. The purpose today is to seek approval from the MDTA Board to execute contract number MDTA 2023-02 for these services. The services to be performed under this contract will include project planning, environmental services, design services, miscellaneous consulting services, including revenue and expense forecasting, toll analysis, and studies pertaining to operating toll systems as directed by the MDTA. MDTA advertised with the intent to award contracts to the 3 highest technically ranked firms in the amounts of $9 million, $6.5 million, and $5 million for a total of $20.5 million. We anticipate presenting this contract to the March 19th, 2025 BPW meeting. If you look on the summary page, you will see 3 of the firms are incumbents in existing comprehensive project planning contracts. And the first award for $9 million is to Rummel, Klepper & Call, LLP. The second award is to Jacobs Engineering for $6.5 million. And the third award is to a joint venture of Wallace Montgomery and WSP for an amount of $5 million. There is a 28% DB participation goal, and all 3 proposed firms have met that goal. Are there any questions on this contract?
Any questions?
I know I asked this at Capitol meeting. How many actual firms bid? Other than, it's just a total of 6, or were there more?
It was 6.
Okay.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do with, I'm tweaking this form as we go, but I'm trying to give you as much information as I can about the proposals. And so the number on here are the number that bid.
Perfect.
Proposed.
Thank you.
If I just note, I mean, even though there's 6, there's actually 8 when you think of these some of these larger firms that have either joint ventured or whatever they've done here.
Yes, so we think of them, even though they are a joint venture, they are proposing as a single entity.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions?
This is Member Ganjin. I'll motion for approval.
A second. Member Carroll.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Aye.
Thank you, Member Rosen and Sneed. Thank you. Very good. Second item?
Okay. The next item is contract number MT00211-372, which is on-call plumbing services for the Southern Region. The purpose of this contract is to retain the services of a qualified contractor to provide on-call repairs and preventative maintenance tasks on plumbing equipment and systems. The provider shall furnish all labor, materials, supplies, equipment, supervision, services, and related incidentals. MDTA received 4 bids. We anticipate presenting the contract at the March 19th, 2025 BPW meeting. The lowest responsible bidder is Langenfelder in the amount of $529,800. They are the incumbent in the southern region for on-call services. There was no MBE participation because the contract is primarily preventative maintenance, which is a single element of work that's not subcontractable by the prime. We received no bid protests. And did you have any questions?
Any questions?
I'll make a motion.
Member
Approval.
Cox?
Member Cox.
Is there a second?
I'll second Member Von
Member
Pearson.
Rosen?
Thank you, Member Rosen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Third item?
Thank you so much. The next one is another maintenance contract. This is MT 002111314, HVAC and ATC maintenance and repairs for the northern MDTA facilities. The purpose of this project is to retain the services of a qualified contractor to provide HVAC and ATC and monthly water treatment services for the JFK and Thomas J. Hayden facilities in the northern, we call the northern region. The provider shall furnish all labor, materials, supplies, equipment, supervision services, and related incidentals. MDTA received 5 bids. 1 bid was rejected for being non-responsive. We anticipate presenting this contract at the April 23rd, 2025 BPW meeting. The lowest responsive and responsible bidder was Denver Ellick at $2,155,660.60. And they are the incumbent in the northern region for these services. There was a MBE goal of 14% and a VSBE goal of 1%, and the bidder has met those goals with their bid. Any questions?
Any questions?
Why was the one rejected?
They didn't submit the proper bid forms, verifying qualifications, and we weren't able to determine their responsibility.
I'll move for approval. Member Jamie.
If I have just one other question
Sorry.
prior. On the American Air LLC, they were significantly off in terms of their bid. Any sense of what that was, or have they communicated with us to understand?
They did not. So we did recognize that, but we also recognized a tighter grouping of the lower
Yeah,
three.
that's what I noticed.
So we felt that they were more representative of the market
Sure.
rates.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Is there a motion for approval? I'm sorry.
Member Jamie, I move for approval.
Second, Member Cox.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Is it 4? Did I say 3?
There's 4. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. This is contract number J01 PB56000016 for VMware licenses. This contract is provision of the VMware licenses. VMware is a suite of virtualization products that the MDTA uses in its data centers, allowing us to run multiple virtual servers on a single physical server. The physical components of this server are better managed by the VMware software, which allows us to operate our data centers more efficiently and experience much smaller maintenance windows. We anticipate presenting this contract to the April 23rd, 2025 BPW meeting. So this was call this a PORF. It was a secondary competition off of a statewide contract for these licenses, and we received 7 proposals, and the lowest being Applied Technology Services, who is actually a current incumbent for these services for us at the MDTA. Their bid amount was $741,912. You'll notice we have an engineer's estimate of 1.2. As we discussed at the Finance Committee meeting, these firms receive significant discounts from the distributors or the manufacturers of the software, and our estimate is generally based on market price.
Gotcha. Very good. Any questions? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved. Member Carroll?
Thank you, Member Carroll. Second?
Member Artinger, I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Moving to agenda item number 4, update on all open contracts.
Yeah, so we're trying a new format so I don't stumble over my numbers and that you all don't have to visualize them all in your head. Yes, no, I'm excited to do it this way. So this report summarizes the number of open memorandum of
Would you check the technology?
Should I continue?
Just check to see if we're still in line.
Yeah.
We good, just to make sure.
Good, we're good.
Okay.
We're good to go? Okay,
I
good.
will continue. So I'll start over. This report summarizes a number of open memorandum of understanding agreements, architectural engineering, construction, maintenance, services, and information technology contracts that we currently hold. And if you will look at the slide, I'm going to summarize this for you since you have the exact numbers here for you. So our MOUs, we have 23 open MOUs with a balance of $23.8 million. We have 63 open A&E contracts with a balance of $696.5 million. We have 39 open construction contracts with a balance of $1.4 billion. Still messed it up. $1.4 billion. Maintenance contracts, we have 25 at $22 million. For services contracts, we have 20 at $40 million. And for IT contracts, we have 29 open contracts at $150 million for a total of 199 contracts at $2.3 billion. You'll see paid to date is $1 billion. POs received but not completely paid out yet is $655 million. Remaining contract balances is $640 million. Any questions?
Any questions? The only question I have, just so everyone's clear, this is particularly, I get the past expenditures, but in the future, you have both the 6-year capital program, for instance, in this, and then the balance to complete is in this number.
Only if the contracts have been awarded.
That's what I meant, but, so
Yes.
you have a contract underway, it may not be complete, particularly on the construction side.
Yes.
In the 6-year window, but we have a balance to complete portion, and that's in this number.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Agenda item number 5 is the approval of G Street Associates. John?
Good morning, members. My name is John Wedemeyer. I'm the real estate manager here at Maryland Transportation Authority. What I have today is I seek the approval from the board for a 7.5 acre parcel of property that we are required to put restrictive covenants on as part of our environmental permitting for the ICC. This property was acquired by SHA for this purpose. It was transferred to MDTA, and now we're putting the restrictive covenants on the property per our permits with the various environmental agencies. Are there any questions?
Questions? Mr. Van Paris?
I do have one question. And I trust the capital committee, but I do have a question as far as future growth and expansion on that north, right where their arrow is. Do we have, I mean, you never know what's happening down, forever's a long time, so.
It is, but
But did we take that into consideration as far as any, or do we need
it's
additional?
outside of the ICC right-of-way footprint, so I don't think we're gonna need it at any point in the future for expansion. And it's one of the requirements per the permits that MDTA needs to do.
For the original construction.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
If not, is there a motion for approval?
Make a motion. Member Kotz.
Member Ganjami, I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, members.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 6 is an update on the ESG report. Ms. Sharpless.
Good morning. For the
Morning.
record, I'm Deborah Sharpless, MDTA's Chief Financial Officer. I'm happy to present MDTA's first Environmental, Social, and Governance report, more commonly known as ESG. The full report is in your materials. And this agenda item was presented to the Finance Committee, and I'd like to recognize Member Rosen, who has assisted us with this effort. A key factor in MDTA undertaking this task is to be proactive when addressing the financial markets and credit rating agencies' increasing interest in ESG criterias. ESG can affect an organization's credit rating by one notch. Preparation of the report was a joint effort and included subject matter experts throughout our agency. MDTA also acquired consultant support through WSP. Our approach in preparing this inaugural report was first research and prioritization. An example would be looking at different formats, how ESG reports can be written. And since we had a focus on our credit ratings, we used a format that aligned closer to what credit rating agencies' information they would expect. Next, we had substantial internal stakeholder input and content development. After that, a series of reviews, and then we identified gaps. In addition to assisting with our credit ratings, the ESG is another tool to communicate and engage with external stakeholders. Moving forward, we're going to build upon this initial report, and in FY25, we're going to focus on climate change impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, as well as enhancing the data aggregation across the entire ESG topics that we've reported on. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Member Rosen, any comments?
I was just getting off mute. No, I just want to commend the team for putting this together. I think it turned out great. It's a great report. I think it's really going to help MDTA from a overall governance perspective and how we do things going forward. And I also think it's very important for our bond rating and for outsiders to know that we are really on top of our game from all aspects of the information contained in this report. So great job to Deb and her team.
Great. Thank you, Member Rosen. Thank you for your assistance on it. Any other questions for Mr. Member Von Paris?
I agree with what's been said, and also this is beneficial on so many areas, so many fronts. And thanks for the great job putting this together as well.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item number 7 is approval of the Investment Committee report. Mr. Gorman?
Thank you. Good morning. This is our required quarterly review of investment strategy and benchmarks. At the Finance Subcommittee level, we go into a lot more detail regarding investment returns and portfolio composition. But the board level is focused primarily on strategy and benchmarks. During the trailing 12-month period, our investments conformed to policy limitations. Our portfolio structuring by account adhered to board-approved strategy, and our duration-targeted reserves maintain consistent structures, and management does not attempt to time market rate changes. Our investment returns and portfolio composition were discussed in much greater detail at the recent February 13th Finance and Administration Committee meeting. We did something a little unusual this last quarter. We addressed a question from the Finance Committee based on the December return data, and we came back the next quarter to address that question. The question was essentially, would a longer duration benchmark be appropriate for any of our longer term reserves? And we addressed that question by coming back with historical return data for a whole series of indices. And we started with some very short-term indices of 1 to 3 year index, and we extended out to much longer-term indices. And so what we demonstrated was index returns over multi-year periods stretching beyond 20 years. And what we were trying to demonstrate is the trade-off in return for those longer-term indices, but also to address downside return volatility. And so what we highlighted were some of the years of negative returns and how frequent and severe those negative returns were. And so our conclusion was that the chosen strategies and benchmarks that we have for the $400 million in long-term reserves represent a reasonable and prudent compromise between our focus on multi-year long-term returns and our tolerance for negative return volatility. And so after hearing that, the Finance Committee agreed with that, and they recommended that we move forward to the full board with the continuation of those strategies. And so that's what we're seeking from the board today, is just an agreement that we can continue with those current longer-term strategies. And just on a final note is that for our capital money and our operating money and our debt service funds, those are always very short-term in nature. And so those accounts are always matched to projected spending, and they're typically with maturities of less than a year. So we're basically just seeking board approval of the continuation of the current strategies and benchmarks.
Thank you. Member Von Paris, as chair, any comments?
I just, I commend the Alan and the team, finance team, for all they're doing here. There's good communication. And as Alan mentioned, there was a question a committee member had and got back to us. That's what he does, and I support this.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion. This is Member Von Paris.
I'll second that, Member Carroll.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Agenda item number 8 is the second quarter operating budget comparison. Mr. Brown?
Good morning. For the record, my name is Jeffrey Brown, Budget Director for the MDTA, and I'm here to provide the quarterly update for the second quarter year-to-date budget versus actual performance for fiscal year 2025. As of December 31st, 2024, we have spent 37% of the budget compared to a target of 49%, except for personnel expenses, which is on budget. All object codes were below budget. Moving into more detail, salary and wages, as just mentioned, are at targeted spending levels with a 47% spend rate. Communications Object 3 is at a 12% spend rate. This is due to the haven't paid the state radio invoice yet, which is a $2 million budget. Once that is paid, we expect this to come back close to budget. Object 4 is below budget with a 20% spend rate. This is due to normal seasonality, which travel is typically heavier in the third and fourth quarters, so we expect this to come back to budget as well. Fuel and utilities, Object 6 is below budget with a 39% spend, and that's primarily due to the underspending in fuel and natural gas. We do expect some of this to increase in the next quarter or so due to winter months. Moving on to Object 7, motor vehicle operations and maintenance. It's close to budget with a 42% spend rate. In more detail, we have vehicle gas and oil, which is below budget with 22%. This is due to the easing of gas prices compared to our original budget assumptions. Vehicle maintenance repair is slightly below budget with 42%, and all other sub-objects are within budget guidelines. Moving on to contractual services, it is below budget with a 24% spend rate. You'll hear some of the same explanations around some of the major expenses such as advertising, engineering, education. These are all typically backloaded. Typical activity occurs towards the later half of the year. So For instance, advertising is below budget with 11% spend, but we do expect more promotional activity in the third and fourth quarters. Engineering is at 30% spend rate, but again, typical activity occurs in the third and fourth quarter, so we do expect this to come back towards budget. Equipment repairs and maintenance is below budget with a 12% spend, or 2% spend rate, sorry. This is timing due to our, it's an IT cost, timing of our payment of our backup system invoice. This is a large invoice and will hit in the next quarter, and we do expect this to bring it back to budget. Building repairs and maintenance is below budget with an 8% spend. This is primarily due to the netting of insurance proceeds against this object. Member Ardinger had a question last time. If we didn't include that, the entire budget would still be within the parameters. It'd be at a 43% spend rate, so it would still be within budget. Education and training, as mentioned, that's another seasonality with a 29% spend rate. We do expect more activity and training courses to occur in the third and fourth quarter. The next key one is management studies, which is at a 15% spend. This is just due to when the timing of the spendings occur. Again, we expect this to be on budget. Fiscal services is pretty close to budget with a 41% spend rate, while Easy Pass Service Center cost is below budget with 14%. We do anticipate this coming back to budget, however. And the last was other contractual services at a 27% spend. Again, as mentioned before, seasonality, we do expect some uptick in the later quarters. Moving on to Object 9, we're at 32% spend rate. Primarily, it's roadway maintenance, which is at a 28% spend. Again, typical maintenance occurs heavier in the third and fourth quarters. Salt is almost self-explanatory. We did have some storms, so we do expect in the third quarter especially to see some of that spending uptick, but that's kind of hard to forecast what the amount would be. Uniforms is below budget with a 36% spend rate. This is just driven by when the orders occur, while ammunition is at an 84% spend rate. This is a challenging one because the lead times on this typically are very long, so we're seeing orders from prior years hitting fiscal 2025. So we'll have to look at that to see if there's any exposure on that. While transponders is pretty close to budget with a 40% spend rate, we expect that to come back to budget. Object 10 is below budget with a 19% spend rate, primarily due to Object 1099, which is below budget at 4%. Again, timing of when orders were received, we do expect orders to come in, so it will come back towards budget. And then additional equipment is below budget with a 24% spend. Again, the timing of when the equipment orders actually arrive. Finally, fixed costs is below budget with a 25% spend, but we do know of a large invoice coming through for property and liability insurance, and when that is paid, we expect this to be exceed the budget by about $2.4 million. So overall, there is the one major risk with the insurance, which we have talked about in the past. We do have to monitor expenses going forward. At this point, we do expect to be able to maintain budget despite the risk we see, but overall, it's still trending to be on budget at this point. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Any questions?
I do have a
You
comment.
didn't read the amendment? Okay, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Member Von Terres?
Just a comment, I guess with the energy costs throughout all segments, in our area especially, they've skyrocketed. And I guess, do we have have we taken additional steps to try to have an awareness of our energy costs and any other measures, initiatives to try to reduce our energy cost, or something to consider? Thank you.
Did you want to answer that? I'm not aware of any specific activity that we've undertaken to look specifically at that, but that's something we could certainly address.
I mean, there have been capital projects, such as the replacement of the lighting in the tunnel. When lighting went to LEDs, that it significantly reduced our utility bills. So there are, planning, and we see they're aware of, and they keep an eye on potential projects that could have a return. And the one that comes to my mind is the lighting.
Okay.
But tracking is really just limited to, where are we from a budget perspective? Where was the budget last year? Where are we this year? And then, weather can play such a role in it. We see that at home, right? When we had the really cold weather, it just makes such a difference.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, there was one other thing that we wanted to mention. There is, we will be asking for an amendment next time we meet with regards to the collective bargaining vehicles that were negotiated. The original assumptions were that we would take ownership and manage that in fiscal year 2026. That's been accelerated, so that's now expected to hit this year. As a result, we will need an amendment to address those additional charges.
But then, so it's offsetting. So the cost of these vehicles was budgeted in '26 in the preliminary budget that the board approved. So we need to pull that budget money into '25 because of the cars being delivered sooner than expected. But when we bring the final FY '26 budget to you around June, we will bring that budget down. So just when we talk about, when the question is, any risks to this budget, there is this budget amendment, but overall MDTA is not a risk because they're offsetting.
Is it to our advantage? Meaning that you're purchasing them sooner, so potentially you're not paying that additional cost?
The purchasing was locked in, the price
okay.
under
Okay.
contract.
Okay.
This is,
Or the delivery side of it?
this is just the delivery of
that's
it and all. But it does help us financially a little bit by taking delivery in '25.
Okay. Any other comments? I have just one, and this may be totally impractical, but, I know we judge the budget against, or the spend rate against the budget, the annual budget. Does it make sense to basically, a lot of these we know aren't coming until third or fourth quarter, so should we be looking for earlier flags where we say we created a budget and we expect to spend certain things at certain quarters, and where are we in terms of hitting that, plus or minus? Because to give you sort of a little bit of an early warning, what something may be going on, otherwise it may be buried, right? Because we're anticipating it into the future because that's historically what has happened. I don't know if that makes any sense. But
We can certainly look at that, Chairman, and basically, when a line item comes in budget the prior year, right, and look and say, this time the prior year, what spend rate were we at?
Right.
And compare that to now. So many of our things are seasonal, that we
Yeah,
need
that's it.
warmer weather.
Yep, yep.
And engineering cost is a perfect example. The bulk of our inspections occur in the spring, and that's in excess of $15 million.
Right.
So, we have a lot of seasonality expenses that we need to wait for warmer weather to do.
Yeah, okay. Just think about it. It's not,
The only thing I would ask, like I said, my previous history, is what you're asking was like a calendarization of the
Sure.
budget.
Yep.
Which, as
By
Deb just
quarter.
mentioned, some of it's tough when it's weather-related.
Right.
It's hard to say when the flag is, but certainly when you have, like, in some cases, we know large invoices are paid at this time. That's easier. You can say, well, like
Something's
we mentioned
right.
with the state radio invoice, we know how much that
Yep.
is worth and what that impact is going to be.
But we will certainly look at it.
okay, one other question. On the utilities, we're all watching what's happening in our own personal lives. One of the things that I've noticed, and I may be incorrect, is part of it obviously usage and dependent upon weather and stuff. But I thought a number of the increases are rated to the delivery of the utility. I don't know if you've looked at your bill close, but your usage may be this close to the same, but what is going up is apparently how the distribution costs have gone up. So I don't know if we're looking at that, monitoring that versus just the normal cycles of weather. Because I think what I'm learning is that it's a little bit more right now, some of these big jump in people's bills was not usage.
It's rates.
Yeah, it's rates. And so I don't know how that impacts us. But anyway, need to give an answer right now, but if we could look into that a little bit.
And in all honesty, we weren't paying close enough attention to realize that there were going to be these rate increases. So, our budget is close to where our budget was last year. And so during, these colder months and all, we need to watch it carefully.
Yeah. I think I think that's one of the biggest surprises, at a personal level, people have seen. But, okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Agenda item number 9 is the update on the capital budget, quarterly update. Ms. Stump?
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Jennifer Stump, and I'm the Assistant Capital Program Manager. Today, I am presenting the second quarter review of the fiscal year 2025 capital budget versus the actual spending as outlined in the fiscal year 25 to 30 draft CTP. This information was also presented to the Finance Administration Committee on February 13th. As of December 31st of 2024, 22.7% of the fiscal year 25 $809.8 million budget was spent, as compared to the targeted spending level of 50%. The actual spending through the second quarter was $183.4 million. 27 of the 91 projects budgeted in fiscal year 25 were within acceptable spending limits of 25 to 75%, which is plus or minus 25% of that 50% target. Due to normal lags in invoicing, generally 2 months, a plus or minus 25% threshold is determined to be reasonable. Attachment A details 10 projects that were budgeted with the highest fiscal year 2025 budgets. The actual spending through the second quarter on these 10 projects was $126.5 million. Overall spending in fiscal year 2025 has remained low through the second quarter due to invoicing delays related to the Key Bridge rebuild. The receipt and processing of these delayed invoices will increase the capital program spending rate for the remainder of fiscal year 2025. 2 I-95 Express Toll Lane northbound extension projects have entered their construction phase, with spending set to ramp up in the spring. This concludes the quarterly update, and please let me know if there's any questions.
Any questions? No, thank you, Ms. Stump.
Thank
Appreciate it. Moving to agenda number 10, the quarterly update on traffic revenue. Ms. Sharpless again?
Thank you again, Deborah Sharpless, MDTA's Chief Financial Officer. I'm going to begin very briefly on your first page of your summary memo. You see a table, and just the point of highlighting this is just to show you where are we in relation to this time last year. And so on a transactional basis, we are 3% behind. You would completely expect that with the Key Bridge. And on a revenue basis, we are $24.8 million behind. Now, on this also talks about the forecast, and I always emphasize that where we are in relation to the forecast is what we need to pay the most attention to, not where were we last year, because we base a lot of decisions on our forecast and the amount of revenue that we anticipate. So for that, I'm going to move down to page 3. First is the attachment A, very high level. On an adjusted basis, we are, essentially spot on our forecast. We're $1.1 million above our forecast. We have a slight timing difference. We had some transactions that were occurring on December 31st that didn't get posted until the next day. So we just bumped over into another quarter. That's what accounts for that $2.2 million. It's not any significant delay whatsoever. And so then what we do on attachment B, we say, okay, what makes up, in this situation, it's a 2.2, right? What makes up for that? And the first part that you see, you see the 1.8, and you see the 383 and the 24,000. That's that December 31st transactions that weren't posted until the next day. And then what we have is we have some posting from CCU that occurred, the same thing, just over in January. And that accounts for our 1.1. That gets us to the 1.1, and then we are seeing average Easy Pass transactions for the first time a little bit below forecast at 3.1 million. And, but then we have the big offset with administrative revenue that's outperforming the forecast. And so on a net basis, that brings us back to the 1.1. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Thank you. Moving to agenda item number 11, legislative reports submitted to legislature.
I know.
Yeah, I know.
This is right though. All right. Good morning. My name is Carl Chamberlain. I'm the Deputy Director of Planning and Program Development here at MDTA. And I am here today to discuss the Maryland Transportation Facilities Buffered Bicycle Pedestrian Lanes Report, which was specified in the Maryland General Assembly 2024 Joint Chairman's Report, which from here on out I'll refer to as a JCR, which is how we refer to it here colloquially and internally. I don't plan to go through this report page by page. You guys have a copy of it there. I'll give an overview, let you guys know what we did, how we did it, why we did it, and I'm here to answer any questions that you guys might have. So. One thing I am going to do for the purpose of just setting the stage is I am going to read the specific language that was in the JCR because it helps, I think, to sort of frame what we did, and it sort of helps frame the structure and elements of the report. So real quick, I am just going to read this specific text. So the committees are interested in the construction of separated or buffered bicycle ways and pedestrian walkways alongside existing and future Maryland Transportation Authority MDTA facilities. Therefore, the committees request that MDTA collaborate with the State Highway Administration, SHA, and relevant local jurisdictions to identify appropriate locations for bicycleways and pedestrian walkways that cross authority highways, run parallel to authority highways and bridges, or otherwise involve MDTA facilities. In identifying appropriate locations, the authority should prioritize providing safe access to transit stations, critical needs areas, neighborhoods separated by authority highways. In addition to identifying the locations, the authority should provide approximate cost estimates for such infrastructure. So as you read the report, you'll notice that we did our best to respond directly to those very specific pieces of information that they requested. Before I get into going through what we did in the report, I'm just going to take 1 minute to, and this information's in the report, but I do want to take just a minute to discuss state law regarding bicycle and pedestrian bicycles on state roadways, as it kind of helps to explain why we define what was sort of in and what was out on some of these portions of our facilities. So bicycles are prohibited on expressways, on any expressway, and on any roadway where the posted speed limit is over 50 miles per hour, with certain exceptions. And per MDTA policy, the entirety of I-95, which includes FMT and JFK, I-395, which includes FMT, I-895, which includes BHT, I-695, which includes FSK, and Maryland 200, which is the ICC, are prohibited to cyclists. That being said, cyclists are allowed on the following state roadways, so US 40 approaching the Hayden Bridge, US 301 approaching Nice-Middleton Bridge, as well as US 1 in the vicinity of the ICC and 895. So, and the point of this reference is just to sort of point out that, when we were identifying these locations for a facility like I-95, where cyclists are prohibited, we're not looking at running buffered bicycle pedestrian way along the entirety of I-95 necessarily, but those crossings where we own the overpasses over I-95 are one of those facilities. These are state roads, and a lot of times these are appropriate locations for those types of things. So again, just to kind of give you some context of what we included and why we included it. Of course, we also can only look at our own assets. So it might be the case that a local jurisdiction or state highway has a project on a corridor that crosses one of our facilities. In this case, when we're doing the costing and we're including this information in a report, we're only looking at that portion of it that's on our assets. So we own that overpass, things like that. We're not looking at the cost of the full facility as it might be. So how do we do this? So to complete this analysis, we grabbed publicly available GIS data on the roadway networks and the bicycle networks that were within the vicinity of all of our assets. We got this from the counties, metropolitan planning organizations, SHA, MTA, all the relevant local jurisdictions. Then we went through and reviewed all the statewide master plans for bicycles. That includes MPO long-range plans, county master plans, all that information. And basically, we developed our own database and mapping for what we thought were existing and planned bicycle pedestrian facilities that interacted with our assets. From that point, we actually reached out and had a meeting with each one of those jurisdictions. So we said, hey, this is what we collected, this is what we have, this is what we think you want to do in the vicinity of our assets. And we let them tell us, like, did we get it right? Is there anything we missed? So that way we, made sure we had the most comprehensive understanding, again, of what these local jurisdictions were interested or might have a planned opportunity or planned facility, again, within our jurisdiction. Once we did that, we looked at each one of those projects, put a planning level cost estimate to that. So again, that's planning level. So the contingencies that were included in that are what you would expect from a planning level estimate. And again, we try to use consistent numbers across, if we were looking at a separated bike facility in one location, we tried to use the same numbers, across the different assets. So I'm not going to go through each one of our facilities, but on page 6, Hayden is the first facility that we did look at. And just as an example, just to run through, so you can see the type of information that we provided. We did an overview of the facility, included any data we currently had about bicycle and pedestrian on that facility. So it just so happens that Hayden does allow bicycles on that facility, so we included that data. Transit access on that facility, nearby connections. Then, of course, we detailed that list of planned facilities that we collected from the local jurisdiction reports that we had analyzed. And then, of course, we just costed those improvements. Within the report itself, we just included a summary map, but there is an appendix where we have more detailed maps for all the facilities and all the projects that were broken down. So if you're looking for more detail, you can go into the appendix, and the appendix is broken out by facility. Couple of notes about the summary and recommendations. So what you'll notice is we have provided a summary table for all of the facilities, which notes the number of improvements that were identified and the total cost of those improvements. One thing I do want to note, though, is that these aren't necessarily funded MDTA commitments in our existing program. Again, this is an identification exercise. So in almost all cases, these are bicycle and pedestrian facilities that were identified by a locality or a county or an MPO in a project that they'd like to do, and again, how it interacted with our asset. So again, even though these aren't necessarily MDTA commitments, MDTA does commit, and one of the things that we do is we work with local stakeholders on all reconstruction projects to accommodate any identified needs. So a good example of this is, we recently just rebuilt a number of overpasses as part of the I-95 ETL program. So as part of that, we would have reached out to Baltimore County, Harford County, discussed what their needs might have been for those crossings since we were rebuilding them, and do our best to accommodate those things as the facility dictates. One of the values that I think this study provides to us, aside from specifically responding to the legislature and what they've asked from us, is it gives us a database for any future coordination and future projects. Whenever we have an overpass that we might be looking at or a project that we're looking at a facility, we can reference this and say, oh, we know that there's going to be, the county might want this, and we can coordinate with them on that for any future projects. So with that, again, I'm happy to take any questions that you guys may have.
Any questions?
I think you touched on
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, 1 second. We have one here at the meeting room first. Go ahead. Sorry.
You touched on this, but I just want to clarify. So the thought pattern behind this is when we're reconstructing an area or addressing a certain area, this is what we could add as a potential bike path. It's not a grand plan to implement this all at one time. Is that your understanding?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
This is basically, it's like a wish list from every county and locality bike master plan that's out there. It's just an aggregation of all those types of projects. Again, where they might interact with our facility gives us the opportunity when, again, we're planning a project in the future, whether it's a reconstruction of a major facility or just one of our crossings, that we can look and say, oh, this is what the county wants, or this is what the MPO wants, or what they envision they would like there, and now let's reach out and coordinate with them and see what we can accommodate and how we can work together on what might be appropriate, dictated by that facility itself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Member Sneed, was that you that wanted to ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you letting me make a comment here. It's a comment of appreciation for the efforts by staff to complete this report as requested by the legislature. I think it opens our eyes to what's possible for alternative modes potentially being on these
at these locations, and I think it's a pretty detailed report as well. And I just want to follow up, is there any possibility or has there been an analysis related to transit alternatives as well on these facilities?
So that was not part of this specific analysis. One thing that we did try to do is identify transit, either bus stops or transit stops that might be along these corridors or within the vicinity of our assets, and look at where there might have been gaps. So I think there might have been even like one or two instances, I think there was very few, where there was a transit stop, but there wasn't a planned bike or pedestrian crossing that was looking for that connection, and so we did try to identify those gaps as well as part of this, but that was pretty rare. For the most part, the counties have been, I think, pretty comprehensive in their planning. A lot of them had recently updated their bike master plans. And then the other thing that we also try to do is, when we coordinated with the jurisdictions, we let them know, like, just because you don't have something on paper doesn't mean we're not going to accept it. So if they hadn't updated their bike master plan in a while, but they knew they had a project, near one of our facilities, we accepted that information in here as well. Again, we wanted to make sure we had the most sort of comprehensive picture as we were going through it. To your point about transit, we did identify transit access on those facilities or in or near those facilities. So there is some of that information in there, members need, but maybe not to the detail that you're thinking about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Sneed. And I'm going to make sure that the LOTS program, the locally operated transit system program that we help support through MTA, I'll make sure that we are looking at that as well in this, if there's any opportunities there as well. The other thing, I just want to comment, obviously the stakeholder meetings you did were fantastic. And yes, this is a report that the legislature has requested, but it is consistent with both the philosophy and the policy of the department, with what we come out with, a complete street policy. So this is very consistent with that understanding of where we're trying to go. So it's not just a one-off. We did the report, we moved on. This is a much more of a change of philosophy. It has a lot to deal with trying to protect the most vulnerable, that use this system, whether they're biking or walking. So this is an important effort, so thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for knowing. I was going to note that here at the end, Chairman, that this sort of was fortuitous because it overlapped with the development of the Complete Streets policy that MDTA did sign off on. So when we began this, and we actually met with Candice and others at TSO and let them know what we were doing, and again, it sort of just, I think, perfectly lined up with this Complete Streets policy that they were working on. So yeah, I think it was fortuitous.
Great, thank you, Carl.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just to bring that down to kind of like the previous professional level for me, I actually met Carl and talking to him about a Howard County priority for a pathway connection that was underneath 895. And, there was some resistance, not from Carl, but from just the different policies in place, including federal highways. There was some confusion about things. So this was important, for me from that perspective to have all those things out there when, so we know about it and we can communicate those.
Great. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item number 12, legislative session. All right. Bless you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. Bradley Ryan with the Office of Government Relations, and I'm here today to update the board on this year's session of the Maryland General Assembly, which convened January 8th, and the 90th and final day will be April the 7th. Of the more than 2,500 bills that have been introduced this session, I'd like to briefly brief you on a few that specifically impact the agency. Last December, the board approved legislation to increase from 180 days to 300 days the time period that tolls, fees, and mileage rates could be temporarily adjusted by the MDTA board during an emergency. Hearings were held for the cross-file bills HB 288 and SB 210, where Bruce testified in favor and we submitted letters of support. The Senate bill passed third reader on February 13th unanimously and is awaiting House consideration, while the House bill is still in the committee process. Senator Kagan and Delegate Ziegler have introduced SB 322 and HB 410, which would prohibit a person from obscuring or modifying a license plate in a manner that may prevent identification. Obscured and modified plates have significant impacts on the tolling and law enforcement operations of the agency. A letter of support was submitted for both bills, and Easy Pass Director of Operations Heather Coberly testified in support of both bills. The Montgomery County delegation introduced legislation HB 988 to authorize the MDTA to operate speed monitoring systems on the ICC. We submitted a letter of support for the bill, which had a hearing last Friday and is awaiting further consideration. Delegate Grammer introduced HB 679, which would require the MDTA to design and locate the entrances and exits to the new bridge over the Patapsco River to ensure that a vehicle that does not cross the bridge is not required to pay a toll. A bill hearing was held where we submitted a letter of opposition. Delegate Long introduced House Bill 1203, which would require the new bridge to not be tolled for a period of 5 years once the bridge is open. The bill hearing will be held later today, where we will submit a letter of opposition. Delegate Jeffrey Long introduced HB 1068, which requires the MDTA to fix, revise, charge, and collect tolls, fees, and other charges at the near optimal toll rate. It establishes a transportation facilities overage account within the Transportation Trust Fund and requires that the MDTA transfer money into the account to be used for certain construction and maintenance projects. The bill has a hearing scheduled for next week where we will weigh in. Lastly, Delegate Stewart introduced HB 1465, which requires MDOT to offer income-based installment payment plans for the payment of tolls, civil penalties, and fines totaling $250 or more. This bill has a hearing later today where a letter of concern will be submitted. And finally, in addition to the legislation I discussed, earlier this month, MDTA budget hearings were held where the Secretary and Bruce were both present. And also Bruce and MDOT leadership presented before the Eastern Shore delegation, and Bruce and Jim Hartness presented before the Baltimore County delegation to discuss issues of importance to the respective delegations. I thank you for your time. Be happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions or comments?
The bill that Senator Kagan introduced, has that had any movement at all?
So in the Senate side, they had the bill hearing, but the committee's not acted on it yet. In the House cross file, it's in the Motor Vehicle and Transportation Subcommittee is currently deliberating the bill and having more concessions on it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
It's been a busy session, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
Agenda item number 13, the Audit Committee update. Member Artinger?
Yep, thank you, Chairman. The Audit Committee met on February 4th, 2025. This was a meeting that had been requested by the Audit Committee for an update on the Citrin Cooper matter. I want to thank all the participants for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. It was good news. The committee was informed that the Novation agreement with Citrin Cooper, who acquired the previous audit services consultant, was completed on January 28th, 2025. Citrin Cooper Management met with the MDTA Audit Director on February 3rd, 2025, and they discussed the completion of the work in progress that had already been done by the previous firm. Citrin Cooper Management stated that they would utilize that work and that had already been invoiced. So we felt comfortable with that progress. Thank you.
Any comments or questions? Great, thank you so much. All right, the final agenda item is the updated Executive Director's Report. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get into that, I just comment on the Audit Committee report is that, anytime you have one of these major kind of purchases of a firm, I've been through myself, Paul, you've probably been through it with others, we always have to keep on them. So that's going to probably be a challenge for the next several months, but we are pleased by that progress that we had so far. So just wanted to make that statement. So for the Executive Director's Report, I've got about 5 things to cover today for that. First, starting off with the governor's unveiling of the Key Bridge design, that preliminary design that you all were able to attend on February 4th. I really thank you for supporting all of the people that have worked so hard to get to that point. A lot of effort over the past year, and it was a great milestone to make sure that have that preliminary design unveiled. As the Secretary said in his remarks, it's optimized to meet the needs of the region by supporting growth at the Port of Baltimore and reconnecting communities, which is incredibly important given the situation that they're in now. The new bridge will be Maryland's first highway cable-stayed bridge and have a lifespan of 100 years. As a reminder, the total length of that will exceed about 3,300 feet, among the longest in the U.S. The design team is working closely with Federal Highways to revise our cost and schedule estimates over the next several months as we move from 15 to 50% design, so 15% to 50% design. As part of our design efforts, the MDTA is planning a process for public input on non-structural design elements, ensuring that bridge resonates with Marylanders. We hope to be engaging with the public in April to seek their input on various elements related to lighting, main span steel color, and other artistic features. So a fair amount of work going into that. We look forward to getting to that milestone in April. Also related to the Key Bridge, there's been a lot of collaboration with Kiewit and other parties to ensure that all stakeholders from the local communities and industry can actively participate on the rebuild project. So on February 3rd, the day before the design unveil, we hosted a networking event with about over 180 participants. The Legislative Black Caucus had representatives there and participated in that event as well. Then on February 10th, we had to do a virtual event for all the people that really couldn't fit in the room, had signed up. So we had about another 80 or so participants that participated in that event. So I'd like to thank Percy Dangerfield and his staff for really partnering with Kiewit on that. There was a breakout room at the in-person event where Kiewit basically stayed and answered any questions one-on-one with folks. And I think we've seen with that, and then, one more event, but on February 20th, one of the main Kiewit partners, leaders in Maryland, Wayne Thomas, participated on a panel for MBE night in Annapolis. Very well-attended event by legislators and MBE contractors. And, I've seen a big change between November, when we were first getting the word out about opportunities for subcontracting on the project, and after these events in February, people are starting to understand how a progressive design build works and the subcontract opportunities, and Kiewit is learning things as well. Their initial thoughts about how they would break things out, Wayne Thomas said on the 20th, it's like they're learning from the different discussions that they have about how they can break up some of the items to not impact the project but provide more opportunities. So that's all been very positive. So shifting from the Key Bridge to another big event that we had the February 12th 59th Officer Candidates class that graduated. The class was comprised of 10 officers for the MDTA and 1 officer from the Department of Natural Resources. So thank you, members Gangemi, Von Paris, and Cox, for representing the board at that event. I think you'll agree that when you see those new officers coming in and just being so dedicated to the path that they've chosen, that they've taken through the academy, and just very enthusiastic about starting their careers. It's a wonderful credit to Colonel Scott and his academy team that that they've really committed to excellence in leading these new officers. So without putting too much pressure on Chief Scott, I think it's to say we're anticipating a much larger class in April, which is a good thing. I have April right as the starting date? Yes, sir. Okay. I think he mentioned that a little bit last year, but we always have our fingers crossed on how many actually show up, so we're not going to give a number, and it can continue throughout that. So, another great event in February. On the 21st, a little bit different, and even a younger crowd of interaction. As part of National Engineers Week, we hosted 25 high school students from Charles County for a tour of the Fort McHenry Tunnel. That was they had several options to choose from as part of Engineers Week, and they chose to come to see us. So long bus ride, got here early to avoid traffic, and were pretty enthusiastic. Ruel, our structures engineering manager and the employee of the quarter, you might remember from our last month, gave a presentation about the tunnel, and representatives from operations and myself, we had an opportunity to speak with the students, and we talked about everything from utility bills, which you just talked a little bit here. They were very interested in how much we pay a month for all the tunnels, so those tunnel replacements and upgrades. Deb mentioned lighting, but they got to see the big fans and the switch gear and the pumps at the bottom of the tunnel. So pretty cold day. It's not any warmer inside than it was outside that day, but once we got into a warm room, it was discussion about the Bay Crossing study. So they were looking at this 40-year-old project and how the tunnel was designed and thinking about that. We didn't have slides on the Bay Crossing study, but they could appreciate that as whether we do that or not, how we prepare for it. Talking about bridges versus tunnels there. They asked questions about why wasn't a bridge done along I-95. So we had a little bit of that discussion. But anyway, this is potentially our future workforce, consultants, MDTA staff. So it was good to engage with the high school students in that way. Looking ahead, another engagement opportunity is our quarterly doing business with the MDTA on March 25th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Usually a sold-out plus event, so we'll probably go ahead and just overcommit to that because we have some no-shows on those. But again, Percy and his team, along with engineering and operations, do a good job just letting people know about the opportunities with the MDTA over the next year. Lastly, on a more kind of targeted note, and one personally connected to those in the executive office, I just want to let you all know that Natalie has accepted a position. That'll make you nervous, right? But as our executive officer within the executive office, so we were able to give her an upgrade recognizing the new duties and the additional work that she's been doing and the incredible job she's been doing for the authority. So I just want to congratulate her on that. So. Nice thing to end. Nice thing to end on. We do have the recruitment out right now for Ebony's replacement. We did an advertisement. We've actually gotten a lot of interest from people around the place. So if we end up stealing any of the chairman's staff, from anywhere else, we advertised.
As you know, that is not how I view it.
Right.
It's where people want to go.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
That's what we support. It's not stealing anybody.
So that concludes my remarks. Thank you very much.
Any
I'll
questions
available.
or comments for the chair? All right. If not, this point of the agenda is complete. Is there a motion to adjourn the
So
meeting?
move. Member Cox?
All in favor?
Aye. Oh, second.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This now concludes the meeting of MDTA Board Meeting at 10:07 a.m. Thank